Hi guys, welcome back to Queen G's Recipes, and today I'm going to be showing you how I like to make my double chocolate pumpkin cookies. Now, I do call it double chocolate because we are using white chocolate chips and semi-sweet chocolate chips, but you can use any chocolate chips of your choice. It's totally up to you. Now, the ingredients we'll be needing are 1 can of pumpkin puree. Make sure it's the puree and not the pumpkin pie filling, because the pumpkin pie filling has additives to it like sugar and spices, and we don't want that in this recipe. Here I have 1.5 cups of melted butter, salted, I'm using salted, and here I have 2 whole eggs. I have 2 cups of brown sugar and 1 cup of white granulated sugar. I have 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, 1 cup of white chocolate chips, and 1 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips. In here we have 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice, and I also added 1/8 a teaspoon of salt. Now, if you are using salted butter, you can omit the salt. That's totally fine, but I still like to add a little bit even though I'm using the salted butter, but you can make that decision to your preference. So let's move on to the next step. You'll also be needing a baking sheet. You'll probably be needing more than one. This recipe does give you a few dozen of cookies, but if you are making bigger cookies, it will give you maybe about 2 dozens, depending on the size you make, but you can also half the recipe if you find that this recipe makes too many cookies for you or for your family, which in my opinion, there's never too many cookies, but at the same time, everyone has their preference, and sometimes you don't want to make a big batch, which is totally understandable. Okay, now make sure that your oven is preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. And now we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so you can make this in your standing mixer, but you can also make this recipe with a spatula and a whisk. Now, whatever's easier for you, you go ahead and do that. But what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna take my dry ingredients, and just with a fork, I'm just gonna kind of incorporate them here without making a mess, which doesn't usually happen. And then we'll just set this aside. And we'll need a bowl if you're not using a standing mixer, and we'll add in our sugars, both sugars, our melted butter, and we're going to mix this well. Okay, now we're going to add in our eggs. After adding in your eggs, you want to make sure that you whisk this for at least a minute. Make sure the eggs are well beaten and incorporated in. And now we'll add in our vanilla, then our pumpkin puree, and mix again. Okay. Now we're gonna have to switch to a spatula. Okay, so when we add in our dry ingredients, the batter is gonna get a little heavy to mix, but just be patient with it. If you're using a spatula and a whisk while doing this recipe, just be patient with it. But if you're using a standing mixer, it will be very, very easy. So now that we have our cookie dough mixture ready, just make sure there's no flour throughout. Make sure you mix it well. You do have to use a bit of elbow grease, I do admit, if you are using a spatula and whisk to make this batter. But at the end of the day, it turns out the same way as if you used a standing mixer. So now we are ready to pour in our chocolate chips. There's a lot of chocolate chips, but it's gonna be worth it. They add great flavor and texture to this recipe. I definitely suggest you use them. And you know what? As soon as your chocolate chips are well incorporated into your batter, you are ready to start scooping and placing them on your baking sheets and baking them in your preheated oven. As always, I'm going to be using my ice cream scoop, and I'm going to be making the big cookies, the large size. So I'm going to use my larger ice cream scoop for scooping. Okay, so now we're ready to scoop our cookies. And as I said, I am using my ice cream scoop, my larger size, because I want to make big cookies. And that's just about it. Scooping them onto your baking sheet. Make sure you spread them a couple of inches apart, especially if you're making big cookies. Even with the smaller ones, you do want to leave enough space because they will expand in the oven for sure. Okay, so now I'll place these into my preheated oven, and I'll let you know what they look like when they're done and how long they were in the oven for. Okay guys, so my cookies were in the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit for exactly 14 minutes. You want to make sure that you don't overbake them or they won't have that chewy, soft texture in the middle. You just want to allow them to bake so that the edges are a nice golden brown, not too much, just a little, as you can see here. Nice golden brown. My cookies have been on the baking sheet for a couple of minutes. That's why I'm able to pick them up off the pan. But just make sure that you don't overbake them, and you will have the perfect, chewy and soft centered cookies. And also make sure that you allow your cookies to sit on the baking sheet once you take them out of the oven for about 5 minutes, and then you can remove them onto and place them onto a cooling rack. Okay guys, so here you have it, our double chocolate pumpkin cookies. I really enjoyed making these cookies for you guys, and if you have any suggestions for any other recipes, please leave it in the comments below. And don't forget to like the recipe if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already so you can see my future videos. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can be the first one to view my recipes that are uploaded. And take care. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.